The church bells tolled 5 o'clock across the small town of Redemption Creek, Texas. But Maribel Gardner remained at the altar, her white dress gleaming in the late afternoon sun that streamed through the stained glass windows, illuminating the empty pews that should have been filled with wedding guests. An hour had passed since James Thompson was supposed to arrive and take her hand in marriage, yet here she stood alone, abandoned on what was meant to be the happiest day of her life. "Maribel, darling, I think it's time we accept he isn't coming," Reverend Patterson said gently, his weathered face creased with sympathy. She clutched her bouquet of wildflowers tighter, the stems damp from her nervous grip. The year was 1875, and being left at the altar wasn't just heartbreaking, it was a social death sentence in a town as small as Redemption Creek. "Just a few more minutes," she whispered, though she knew in her heart that James had fled. The rumors of gold in California had turned his head, and apparently even the promise of marriage to the schoolteacher couldn't compete with the lure of fortune. Mrs. Patterson, the Reverend's wife, approached with a glass of water. "Child, you've been standing here since 4. Your father is outside pacing a hole in the dirt, and your mother has already gone home in tears." Maribel nodded slowly, finally allowing the truth to sink in. "I just never thought he would." The church doors burst open with a bang that echoed through the empty sanctuary. Maribel's heart leapt, but it wasn't James who stood in the doorway. Instead, a tall figure silhouetted against the blinding sunlight stepped inside, removing his hat as he crossed the threshold. "Sorry to interrupt," a deep voice drawled. "I was passing through town when I heard there might be a wedding. Appears I'm late." As the stranger moved further into the church, Maribel could make out his features' sun-bronzed skin, eyes the color of a summer storm, and dark hair that curled slightly from being pressed beneath his hat. He wore trail-worn clothes covered in dust, and a gun belt hung low on his hips, marking him as one of the many cowboys who passed through their sleepy town. "There is no wedding," Mrs. Patterson announced curtly. "You may as well be on your way, mister." The stranger's eyes never left Maribel's face. "That's a shame," he said quietly. "Seems like someone's made a terrible mistake." Reverend Patterson stepped protectively in front of Maribel. "Young man, this is hardly the time for Kent Vaughn," the stranger interrupted, introducing himself with a slight bow. "Just rode in from Laramie, was hoping to find work at one of the local ranches." Maribel found her voice at last. "Well, Mr. Vaughn, as you can see, you've arrived on a rather unfortunate day. If you'll excuse me." She gathered her skirts and moved to exit the church, desperate to escape the humiliation that burned her cheeks. "Miss," Kent called after her, "I don't mean to impose, but I'd be honored to walk you home. These streets can be dangerous for a lady alone, especially one as—" He paused, his eyes taking in her wedding attire. "As finely dressed as yourself." Her father would be furious if she accepted an escort from a strange man, but something in Kent's eyes, a genuine concern perhaps, or simple kindness, made her hesitate. "That won't be necessary, Mr. Vaughn. My father is waiting outside." Kent nodded, respectfully stepping aside. "Of course." "Forgive my presumption." As Maribel passed him, their eyes met briefly, and something electric passed between them, a moment of understanding that left her momentarily breathless. Then she hurried past, rushing out to where her father waited with their wagon, his face a storm of rage and embarrassment. "That Thompson boy," Harold Gardner spat as he helped his daughter into the wagon. "I'll track him down myself if I have to. No man does this to my daughter," and walks away. "Please, Papa," Maribel whispered, fighting back tears. "I just want to go home." As they drove away from the church, Maribel couldn't help looking back. Kent Vaughn stood in the doorway, watching her leave, his tall figure framed by the church's entrance. Something about him lingered in her mind, a curious counterpoint to the heartbreak that threatened to overwhelm her. 3 days passed in a blur of tears and whispers. Maribel refused to leave the house, unable to face the pitying looks and wagging tongues of Redemption Creek. Her mother brought her meals on trays that went largely untouched, and her father continued to make inquiries about James's whereabouts, determined to restore his daughter's honor. On the fourth day, a knock at the door roused Maribel from her listless state. She heard voices in the parlor, her mother's nervous titter, her father's gruff responses, and another voice, deep and measured. Curious, she crept to the top of the stairs. "Mr. Gardner, I understand your hesitation," Kent Vaughn was saying. "I'm a stranger in your town, but I've secured a position at the Rockingham Ranch and have references from my previous employer in Wyoming." "And what exactly does this have to do with my family, Mr. Vaughn?" her father demanded. "I'd like permission to call on your daughter, sir." Maribel's breath caught in her throat. The audacity of this man to come here so soon after her humiliation. "My daughter is in no state to receive callers," her father replied coldly. "Especially not men she doesn't know." "With all due respect, sir, sometimes the best remedy for a broken heart is to know that not all men are dishonorable." There was a long silence, and Maribel strained to hear what would come next. Finally, her mother spoke. "Perhaps Harold. It might do Maribel good to have a distraction." "She can't hide away forever." To Maribel's astonishment, her father sighed heavily. "You may call on Sunday afternoon, Mr. Vaughn, for tea, but I warn you, if my daughter shows the slightest discomfort, you'll be shown the door." "That's more than fair, sir, thank you." Maribel retreated to her room before she could be discovered eavesdropping. She sat on her bed, bewildered by this turn of events. Why would this cowboy, this complete stranger, be interested in calling on her? Was it mere pity? Or something worse, had he heard about her humiliation and thought her an easy target? The very idea made her blood boil. Sunday came too quickly. Maribel reluctantly donned her second-best dress, a modest blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. She'd initially refused to come downstairs when Kent arrived, but her mother had been insistent. "It's just tea, Maribel," she'd said. "And your father will be present the entire time. What harm could it do?" So Maribel found herself sitting stiffly in the parlor, pouring tea for Kent Vaughn, who looked considerably more presentable than he had at the church. His hair was neatly combed, his clothes clean if simple, and he'd brought a small bouquet of wildflowers that now sat in a vase on the table. "Mr. Vaughn was just telling us about his work at the Rockingham," her mother said, attempting to ease the tension that filled the room. "Yes," Kent confirmed, his eyes finding Maribel's. "Mr. Morrison has put me in charge of breaking the new horses. It's good work, though the pay isn't much." "And what brought you to Redemption Creek, Mr. Vaughn?" Maribel asked directly, unable to contain her suspicion. "It's hardly on the main trails." Kent took a sip of tea before answering. "Honestly, I was following a feeling. I've been drifting for a few years now, never staying in one place too long. But when I crossed into Texas, something told me to head this way." He smiled slightly. "I like to think it was Providence." "Providence," Maribel echoed skeptically, "or fate if you prefer," Kent added, his gaze steady. "Sometimes life has a way of putting us exactly where we need to be, even when we don't understand the reason." Maribel set down her teacup with a clatter. "And you believe you were meant to arrive in our church, just in time to witness my greatest humiliation. How fortunate for you." "Maribel." Her mother gasped, but Kent held up a hand. "It's a fair question, Mrs. Gardner." He turned back to Maribel. "I don't believe I was meant to witness your pain, Miss Gardner, but perhaps I was meant to be here afterward to remind you that one man's foolishness doesn't dictate your worth." The sincerity in his voice caught Maribel off guard. She'd expected platitudes or, worse, condescension. Instead, his words held a simple truth that resonated somewhere deep inside her. "Well," her father interjected, breaking the moment, "if you're planning to stay in Redemption Creek, Mr. Vaughn, you should know we're a God-fearing community. Church attendance is expected." Kent nodded. "I've already spoken with Reverend Patterson. I'll be there next Sunday." The visit lasted another half-hour, during which Kent spoke mostly of his work with horses and his travels throughout the West. He was articulate and respectful, and by the time he rose to leave, even her father seemed less hostile. At the door, Kent turned to Maribel. Miss Gardner, would you do me the honor of allowing me to escort you to the town social this Saturday? I understand if it's too soon, but I thought perhaps— Yes, Maribel found herself saying, surprising everyone, including herself. I would like that, Mr. Vaughn. After he'd gone, her mother couldn't contain her delight. He seems like a fine young man, Maribel, steady employment, good manners. Mother, please, Maribel sighed, it's just a social, I'm not marrying the man. But as the week progressed, Maribel found herself thinking of Kent Vaughn more often than she cared to admit. She heard from Mrs. Peterson at the general store that he was making quite an impression at the Rocking M, taming a stallion that had thrown every other hand who tried to ride him. The town's opinion seemed to be forming in his favor. He was hardworking, polite, and, as many of the younger ladies had noted, uncommonly handsome. By Saturday, Maribel had convinced herself that her interest was merely a distraction from her heartbreak, nothing more. She wore a simple green dress and arranged her hair in a practical style, determined not to appear as though she'd made too much effort. Kent arrived precisely at 7, wearing a clean shirt and vest, his usually unruly hair tamed with pomade. He handed her another small bouquet, this time of desert roses. "You look beautiful, Miss Gardner," he said quietly, and the simple compliment brought unexpected warmth to her cheeks. The social was held in the town hall, a modest building that served multiple purposes in their small community. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a golden glow over the wooden floor where couples were already dancing to the lively tune of fiddles and a piano. As they entered, Maribel felt the stares and heard the whispers. Most of the town had attended her failed wedding, and now here she was, not even 2 weeks later, on the arm of a handsome stranger. Perhaps this was a mistake, she murmured, faltering at the threshold. Kent leaned closer. Would you prefer to leave? We could take a walk instead. The consideration in his offer strengthened her resolve. No, she said firmly, I have nothing to be ashamed of. James is the one who should be hiding his face, not me. Kent's smile was slow and appreciative. That's the spirit. Now may I have this dance, Miss Gardner? He led her onto the floor just as the musicians struck up a waltz. Kent was surprisingly graceful for a cowboy, guiding her confidently through the steps. As they moved together, the room seemed to fall away, the whispers fading into insignificance. Where did you learn to dance like this? She asked, genuinely curious. My mother insisted, he replied. Said a man should know how to move properly, whether in a saloon or a ballroom. His expression softened at the mention of his mother. She was determined I'd have some refinement despite my father's objections. And where are your parents now? A shadow crossed his face. Gone, Pa first in 65. He was with the Union Army at Gettysburg. Ma held on until 70, then a fever took her. I'm sorry, Maribel said softly. Kent shook his head slightly. It was a long time ago. What about your family? Have they always lived in Redemption Creek? As they danced, Maribel found herself telling Kent about her family's journey from Georgia after the war, how her father had rebuilt their fortune through careful investments in cattle, and her own passion for teaching at the local school. The children must adore you, Kent observed. You have a way of explaining things that makes them clear as crystal. Maribel laughed. Are you saying I've been lecturing you, Mr. Vaughn? Not at all, he replied with a grin. I'm saying you're a natural storyteller, and please call me Kent. Mr. Vaughn makes me feel like my father. The evening passed swiftly, filled with dancing, punch, and conversation. Kent introduced her to a few of the hands from the Rocking M Ranch who had come to town for the social, and Maribel was struck by the respect they showed him despite his relatively recent arrival. Vaughn broke that demon stallion like it was nothing, one cowboy named Pete informed her. Never seen anything like it. No spurs, no whip, just patience and a steady hand. It's not so different from teaching, Kent said modestly. You have to understand what they're afraid of before you can help them past it. As the night drew to a close, Kent escorted Maribel home, their pace slow under the canopy of stars that blanketed the Texas sky. Thank you for coming tonight, he said as they approached her house. I know it couldn't have been easy facing everyone so soon after being jilted. Maribel finished for him. You can say it, I'm trying to make peace with it. They stopped at her gate. Kent turned to face her, his expression serious in the moonlight. Maribel, I want you to know something. That man, James, his leaving had nothing to do with you and everything to do with his own weakness. Any man worthy of the name would consider himself fortunate to stand beside you, in church or anywhere else. His words, spoken with such conviction, touched a place in her heart that had been aching since that terrible day at the altar. Thank you, Kent, she whispered. Good night. Good night, Maribel, may I call on you again? She nodded, unable to deny that she wanted to see him again, wanted it more than she should. Given how recently her heart had been broken over the next few weeks, Kent became a regular visitor at the Gardner home. He brought small gifts, a ribbon for her hair, a book of poetry he'd found at the general store, wildflowers whenever they bloomed along his path. They took walks together, rode out to the creek for picnics, chaperoned by Maribel's younger sister, and attended church services side by side. Maribel found herself looking forward to his visits, her heartbreak over James fading more quickly than she would have thought possible. Kent was different, steady, thoughtful, and unfailingly honest. When he spoke of his dreams for the future, she found herself imagining a place within them. But just as summer was giving way to autumn, trouble arrived in Redemption Creek. James Thompson returned, without the gold he'd chased to California, but with plenty of excuses and apologies. He appeared at the Gardner home one evening, hat in hand, looking thin and desperate. Maribel was alone in the parlor when he arrived, her parents having gone to visit neighbors. The sight of him, once so dear to her, now so pathetic, stirred a complex mix of emotions. Maribel, he began, his voice breaking, I've been a fool, the worst kind of fool. Can you ever forgive me? She studied him, this man she had once agreed to marry, and found that the pain of his betrayal had dulled to something more like pity. What are you doing here, James? She asked quietly. I've come back for you, he declared. To make things right, to fulfill my promise. Maribel shook her head slowly. You're too late. You broke your promise and my heart when you left me standing alone in that church. James's expression hardened. It's that cowboy, isn't it? I've heard the talk. You didn't waste any time finding a replacement. His bitter words stung, but Maribel refused to be cowed. Kent Vaughn is twice the man you are. He would never abandon someone he claimed to love. You don't even know him, James exploded. He's a drifter, Maribel, a nobody who showed up out of nowhere. At least my family has roots here. He may not have roots here yet, but he has something you lack: integrity. Maribel moved toward the door. I think you should leave, James. James's face twisted with anger. This isn't over, Maribel. That saddle tramp doesn't belong here and everyone knows it. He won't last the winter in Redemption Creek. Mark my words. After he stormed out, Maribel sat trembling, unsettled by the venom in James's voice. She hadn't expected him to return, certainly not with such entitlement, as if her heart were a piece of property he could reclaim at will. The next day, she met Kent for their usual Sunday afternoon walk and told him about James's visit. Kent's expression grew serious as she recounted the confrontation. Are you all right? He asked, his concern evident. Yes, she assured him. More angry than upset, honestly. The audacity of him to think he could just walk back into my life. Kent was quiet for a moment. Maribel, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest. He stopped walking and turned to face her. Do you have any feelings left for him? Because if there's even a chance you might want to reconcile, no, she interrupted firmly. Whatever I felt for James died the day he left me at the altar. I could never trust him again. Relief washed over Kent's features. I'm glad to hear it. Not because I'm jealous, though I admit I am, but because you deserve better than someone who would hurt you that way. They continued their walk, but Maribel sensed Kent was holding something back. Finally, as they neared her home, he spoke again. There's something else I should tell you. Yesterday at the ranch, James came by looking for work. Maribel stopped short. At the Rockingham? Why would he do that? Mr. Morrison didn't hire him, said he had no need for another hand, but before he left, James made some threats. Said I should watch my back, that I didn't know who I was dealing with. That's ridiculous, Maribel exclaimed. James isn't dangerous, he's just desperate. Desperate men can be dangerous, Maribel. Kent's eyes were troubled. I don't want you to worry, but I thought you should know. That night, Maribel lay awake, her thoughts in turmoil. She couldn't imagine James actually hurting anyone, but his behavior was becoming increasingly erratic. And beneath her concern, another realization was taking shape. Her feelings for Kent had grown into something profound, something that frightened her with its intensity. The following week brought the Autumn Harvest Festival, an important event in Redemption Creek's calendar. The whole town gathered to celebrate the season's bounty with food, games, and dancing under the stars. Maribel had agreed to help with the children's activities, while Kent had volunteered his skills for the horse races. The day of the festival dawned clear and crisp. Maribel wore her favorite dress, a russet-colored frock that complemented her auburn hair. She hadn't seen Kent in 2 days. He'd been busy with extra work at the ranch, and she found herself eagerly scanning the crowd for him as she supervised a group of children bobbing for apples. Finally, in mid-afternoon, she spotted him near the racing track, helping to set up the course. She waved, and he tipped his hat in acknowledgement, a smile breaking across his face. The simple gesture sent warmth spreading through her chest. Later, as the races began, Maribel found a place near the finish line to watch. Kent was magnificent on horseback, his body moving in perfect harmony with his mount, a spirited bay from the Rockingham stock. He won his heat easily, earning cheers from the crowd and a place in the final race. As the riders lined up for the final, Maribel noticed James Thompson among them, mounted on a borrowed horse. Her stomach knotted with apprehension. James was a skilled rider, but his presence here, competing directly against Kent, seemed deliberately provocative. The race began with a crack of the starter's pistol. The horses thundered down the track, dust billowing behind them. Kent took an early lead with James close behind. They pulled ahead of the other riders, the race becoming a contest between just the two of them. As they approached the final turn, James urged his horse alongside Kent's, and Maribel saw him lean in, saying something that Kent clearly found disturbing. Kent's concentration broke for just a moment, but it was enough. His horse stumbled slightly, allowing James to pull ahead and cross the finish line first. The crowd erupted in cheers, unaware of what Maribel had witnessed. James accepted his prize money with a smug smile while Kent dismounted and led his horse away, his expression grim. Maribel hurried after him. Kent, wait, he stopped, turning to face her. Maribel, I'm sorry, I let him get to me. What did he say to you? Kent's jaw tightened. Nothing worth repeating, just trash talk to break my focus. It worked. Kent, she pressed, touching his arm, please tell me. He sighed, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. He said he knew things about me, about my past. Said if I didn't leave town, he'd make sure everyone knew what kind of man I really am. Maribel frowned. What was he talking about? Kent's expression became guarded. I don't know. Probably nothing, just trying to rattle me. But Maribel could see he was troubled. Kent, if there's something I should know, there isn't, he said firmly. Everyone has parts of their past they're not proud of, Maribel. I've never hidden who I am from you. Before she could respond, they were interrupted by Mr. Morrison, Kent's employer. Vaughn, fine riding today despite the outcome. We'll get him next year. The rancher nodded to Maribel. Miss Gardner, you're looking lovely as always. I hope you'll save a dance for an old man like me at the bonfire tonight. Of course, Mr. Morrison, she replied with a polite smile. After the rancher moved on, Kent turned back to Maribel. I should check on my horse. I'll see you tonight. She nodded, but as she watched him walk away, a seed of doubt had been planted. What wasn't Kent telling her? And what did James think he knew? The bonfire that night was spectacular, a towering blaze that lit up the field where tables had been set for the community feast. Lanterns hung from ropes strung between posts. creating a festive atmosphere as musicians played and couples danced on a wooden platform erected for the occasion. Maribel arrived with her family, her eyes immediately searching for Kent. She found him helping to serve food at one of the tables, his face relaxed and smiling again. Whatever had troubled him earlier seemed to have passed. The evening progressed pleasantly. Maribel danced with Mr. Morrison as promised, then with her father, and finally with Kent, who held her a little closer than propriety strictly allowed. As they moved together under the starlit sky, Maribel felt her doubts from earlier melting away. "You look beautiful tonight," Kent murmured, his eyes reflecting the firelight, "like autumn itself." Maribel smiled up at him. "You're quite the poet for a cowboy, only when properly inspired." His gaze grew serious. "Maribel, there's something I've been wanting to tell you." "Something important," her heart quickened. "What is it?" Before he could answer, a commotion erupted near the food tables. James Thompson stood swaying, clearly drunk, his voice raised in anger. "You're all being fooled," he shouted, pointing wildly. "That man, Kent Vaughn, isn't who he claims to be." The music stopped abruptly. Kent froze, his hands tightening on Maribel's waist. "He's a criminal," James continued. "I received a letter from a friend in Laramie. There was a Kent Vaughn there all right wanted for theft and assault." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Kent released Maribel and stepped forward, his expression controlled. "That's enough, Thompson," he said evenly. "You're drunk and making a fool of yourself." James pulled a crumpled paper from his pocket. "I have proof. A wanted poster with your name and description. Dangerous and armed, that's what it says." Mr. Morrison stepped between them. "James, this is neither the time nor the place. If you have concerns about one of my men, you bring them to me privately." "Why?" James demanded. "So you can cover for him. He's fooled all of you, especially her." He jabbed a finger toward Maribel. Ask him if he's ever been in trouble with the law." All eyes turned to Kent, who stood rigid, his face unreadable in the firelight. Maribel moved to his side, her heart pounding. "Kent," she whispered. He looked down at her, his eyes filled with resignation. "There was a man in Laramie with my name," he admitted quietly. "But it wasn't me, Maribel, I swear to you." Before she could respond, James lunged forward, brandishing the paper. "Liar. You're a wanted man, and I'm claiming the reward." Several men moved to restrain James, who was now shouting incoherently. In the chaos, Kent took Maribel's hand and led her away from the crowd, toward the darkness at the edge of the field. "Kent, what's happening?" she demanded once they were out of earshot. "Is what he's saying true?" Kent ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Not the way he's telling it. Yes, there was trouble in Laramie. A man accused me of stealing his horse, a horse I bought fair and square. When he tried to take it back by force, there was a fight. He was hurt, not badly, but his family had influence with the sheriff." "So you ran?" Maribel asked, trying to understand. "I left," Kent corrected, "with a horse I legally owned. I didn't know there was a poster until a week ago when a friend wrote to warn me. That's what I wanted to tell you tonight." Maribel's mind was reeling. "Why didn't you say something earlier, when James first threatened you?" "Because I was afraid," Kent admitted, his voice strained. "Afraid you'd look at me differently, afraid you wouldn't believe me. And now," she asked, "what happens now? Will you run again?" Kent's expression hardened. "No, I'm tired of running from lies. I'll face this, clear my name." He took her hands in his. "But I need to know, Maribel, do you believe me?" She stared into his eyes, searching for truth in their depths. Everything in her wanted to believe him, but the seed of doubt James had planted had taken root. "I want to," she whispered, "but this is all so sudden, so confusing." Pain flickered across Kent's features. "I understand, you need time, but I need you to know something, Maribel Gardner." He took a deep breath. "I love you. I think I have since that first moment in the church when you stood so proud despite your pain. Whatever happens next, that's the truth." His declaration left her speechless. He loved her. And despite the tumult of the evening, she knew with sudden clarity that she loved him too. Before she could find the words to tell him, shouts erupted from the direction of the bonfire. Someone was calling Kent's name. "The sheriff," Kent muttered. Thompson must have gone to get him. What will you do? Maribel asked urgently. Kent straightened his shoulders. Face him, tell the truth, it's the only way. They walked back together, hand in hand, to find Sheriff Davies waiting with James, who looked triumphant despite his disheveled state. Kent Vaughn, the sheriff said formally, I need to speak with you about some serious allegations. I'm aware, Sheriff, Kent replied calmly. And I'm prepared to address them. Not here, Sheriff Davies said, gesturing toward town. My office. Maribel clutched Kent's hand. I'm coming with you. No, Maribel, Kent said firmly. Stay here with your family. I'll come find you when this is sorted out. But trust me, he said, his eyes holding hers. Please. She nodded reluctantly, watching as Kent walked away with the sheriff, his back straight and his head high. James followed, stumbling slightly, still clutching his precious paper. The festival continued, subdued by the dramatic interruption, but Maribel could think of nothing else. Her parents found her and insisted she return home with them, her father muttering about the wisdom of associating with drifters. I knew that man was trouble, he said as they rode home in their wagon. No roots, no connections, just the kind to have a past he's running from. You don't know that, Papa, Maribel objected. You don't know him at all. And do you, her father challenged, really know him? Or have you been so eager to mend your broken heart that you've been blind to the truth? His words stung because they held a kernel of truth. Had she been blind? Had she allowed herself to fall in love with a man she barely knew simply because he'd appeared when she was most vulnerable? That night, Maribel lay awake, torn between doubt and faith. She replayed every conversation, every moment with Kent, searching for signs of deception. But all she could recall was his steadiness, his honesty in small things, the way his eyes never wavered when he spoke to her. Dawn was breaking when she heard a tap at her window. She rushed to it, pushing aside the curtain to find Kent standing below, his face weary but resolute. Quickly, she threw on a wrapper and crept downstairs, opening the front door as quietly as possible. Kent, she whispered. What happened? Are you all right? I'm fine, he assured her. The sheriff sent a telegram to Laramie last night. The reply came this morning. The charges were dropped weeks ago when the real thief was caught. The man who accused me apologized for the mistake. Relief flooded through Maribel. So it's over. You're free, Kent nodded. Thompson's furious, of course. He was counting on that reward money. His expression grew serious. But that's not why I'm here, Maribel. I came to ask you something important. He took her hands in his touch warm and familiar. Last night, before everything happened, I was about to tell you that I love you. I still do, more than I thought possible. I know it's soon, and after what happened with James, you have every reason to be cautious, but I'm asking you to take a chance on me. From his pocket, he produced a small ring, a simple band with a single modest stone. I've been carrying this for weeks, waiting for the right moment. This may not be it, but I don't want to wait any longer. Maribel Gardner, will you marry me? Maribel's heart swelled with emotion. 6 weeks ago, she had stood abandoned at the altar, certain her life was over. Now here was this man, this honest, steadfast man, offering her a new beginning. Yes, she whispered, tears filling her eyes. Yes, I will marry you, Kent Vaughn. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a gentle kiss, their first. It was sweet and tender, full of promise and hope. They were married 2 weeks later in the same church where Maribel had once been left waiting. This time, when the doors opened, it was Kent who stood there, his eyes never leaving hers as he walked confidently to the altar. Reverend Patterson performed the ceremony, his joy evident as he pronounced them husband and wife. James Thompson left Redemption Creek the day after their wedding, heading west again in search of new opportunities and, perhaps, a measure of peace. Maribel heard years later that he had settled in Arizona, married a rancher's daughter, and found the stability that had eluded him in his youth. As for Kent and Maribel, they built a life together that exceeded both their dreams. With savings from his work at the Rocking M and a loan from her father, who had eventually come to respect his son-in-law's character, they purchased a small ranch outside of town. Kent's skill with horses soon made their breeding stock sought after throughout the territory, while Maribel continued teaching, eventually opening a schoolhouse on their property for the children of neighboring ranches. Their first child, a daughter named Hope, arrived exactly 1 year after their wedding day. A son, Daniel, followed 2 years later. By the time their third child was born, another girl they named Elizabeth Kent had expanded their ranch to 3 times its original size and built Maribel the house she had always dreamed of, complete with a library filled with books. On their 5th anniversary, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the Texas sky in shades of gold and crimson, Kent turned to his wife with a smile. "You ever think about that day in the church?" he asked. "The day we first met." Maribel leaned her head against his shoulder. "Sometimes. It's strange to think that the worst day of my life led me to the best years I could have imagined," Kent chuckled. "Providence has a curious way of working things out. Or fate," Maribel added, echoing his words from long ago. "Either way," Kent said, pulling her closer, "I'm grateful every day that I followed that feeling to Redemption Creek and found you waiting." "And I'm grateful you claimed me," she whispered, reaching up to touch his face, weathered now from years of working under the Texas sun but still as dear to her as it had been that first day. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across their land, they sat together in comfortable silence, surrounded by the life they had built, a life neither could have envisioned on that fateful day when a heartbroken bride waited at the altar, and a dusty cowboy rode in from the horizon to claim her heart.